welcome back. This is Annemey from M10 Gulliver's Bucket, and it's good to have you here. So I found a book, and it's called The Little Book of Last Words by Joe Gillard, and it has the most fantastical little words in it. So I decided from now on we're going to start every video with a last word. So for today, oh, and this is the cover of the little book. So for today, the last word is kickshaw. It is a noun, and it is pronounced as kickshaw. It's 16th century English. It is a dish that looks good but is lacking in substance. So Janessa had eaten 9 courses of kickshaw, each the size of a grape, at the Michelin-starred restaurants. So on the drive home, she stopped for a cheeseburger. So it is those very fancy meals that have almost no substance. So that is our word for today, kickshaw. Then, getting back to today's video. So it is a new month. It is February, and it is the first week of February. Today, or the day that you're seeing this, will be the 4th of February, which means that it is time for a January 2020 reading wrap-up. So today I'll be talking about the books that I read in January, what I thought about them, and the star rating I gave them. So I do work in 0.5s because I feel 3 out of 5 doesn't say much, but 3.5 out of 5 says a bit more. So that is how that works. So without further ado, let's get cracking. First, we're going to start with the books that I did for my course, because this semester we are doing narratology and the novel, which means that we have to read about a book a week, and then we have a seminar and we talk about that book and the seminar, discuss a few points, what we thought, themes, the writing style, anything of that sort. And honestly, I'm loving that. It's so fun. I especially adore my seminar leader, or my mentor, because she has so many insightful things to say that I feel like when I walk out of there, I have a few points to consider afterwards. That, and then the other people in the seminar with me also all bring like these valid points and interesting thoughts on the books that we've done. And it's just an hour long, so I kind of wish that our seminars did go on longer, but oh well. So the 2 books that I have read so far, there is technically a third one, but I've got like 15 pages left, so I'm not counting it for January. But the first book that we did this semester was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I feel this is what I do. As you can see, there were notes that she handed out, and there was notes that I took, and sticky notes everywhere, and scribblings in the margins. But everyone probably knows the story about Frankenstein. It follows Victor Frankenstein, this mad scientist, or this young man that is driven by curiosity. And this is the story of him telling how he created a monster, or he animated like different body parts that he sewed together and gave it life. So this is the story of how Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, this genius for all intents and purposes, created life and comes to rue the day. And I quite enjoyed it. I hadn't read it before this. Like, I had a basic idea of the story. I had the basic idea that yes, Frankenstein's monster, or his creature actually, wasn't stupid, and that this is a retelling of Prometheus, and how the pursuit of knowledge has repercussions. And to be honest, it surprised me, but also didn't surprise me. 4 stars, because it was good, but it wasn't amazing. I don't think I'd ever want to read it again, and it is not something that I'd say your life will be the proof for not reading. But it is a classic for a reason, and I really enjoyed the insight that Mary Shelley's life brought into the book, and that discussion was also quite good. But overall, the book was, I enjoyed it, and I can see why this is seen as the start of horror and the start of science fiction, because quite a few new ideas and techniques were introduced in the writing of this novel before that was way ahead of its time. But yeah, then after that we read this. It's called Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Well, then we read Jane Eyre, which I didn't read the last 20 pages of, but which I finished like 2 days ago. And then we read Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, and this is by Harriet Jacobs. So this is an autobiography written by Harriet Jacobs, who was a slave in Missouri and Louisiana, if I've got it correctly. And pretty much this is her tale of what slavery truly is. So in her author's notes, in the first chapter, she comes and she says, this is a story for all the women in the north of America. So as you most probably know, North and South were divided about what they considered right and wrong with regards to slavery. And she said this is a book to convince them that yes, slavery is terrible, and to show them what slavery really is. And she had it, in her own words, a lot better than many others. So if they can imagine her plight, imagine that of the others. And honestly, I had never heard of this book before this, which was quite an upsetting thought for me, because I think this should be a classic. This should be one of those, it should be ranking on the level of as well known as 12 Years a Slave, which is a novel, or Jane Eyre, because honestly, this is quite an important book, because this is a first-person narrative, and it's written in such a way that you realize it's not over-exaggerated, because it's written in a frankness that you know, shit, this happened. This was the life of someone. And I found it quite upsetting, but this was a 5 out of 5 star read. It was amazing. It taught me quite a bit, and the fact that it was written in that time, published in that time, under a pseudonym, because she was afraid for her safety and the safety of those that she knew and loved, that this is such an important book that I feel nobody knows about or has seen just because it's been lost. And that I find quite sad and upsetting. And then the book itself was quite sad and upsetting. It was a difficult read, let's put it that way. But yes, it follows this young girl and her recounting of slavery after she has escaped with her children and is now in New York writing this novel to bring information to those in a privileged position, or in the position to not see it firsthand, and maybe incite them into action. And yes, I highly recommend, but I must warn you, it is quite upsetting in the fact that it is detailed and you can see the suffering of people quite prominently. So those were the 2 books that I had completed for this week for my English literature module in my course. But I also read a few non-fictions. Fictions this month, just because I wanted to and not because they were prescribed reading. So the first one I read this year and the month of January was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, and it was a lovely, funny read. It was a 3.5 star. It was a young Spanish woman and this man in the office are enemies. They hate each other. There's constant banter, but she needs a day to her sister's wedding because her ex is going to be there with his girlfriend. But she ends up lying to her mother and saying, oh no, it's her boyfriend, instead of just, oh yes, this friend, da 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 da. Long story short, they end up going to Spain together, falling in love because it is a romance, it is a chick lit, and just having a good time. That's pretty much it. So it was a very, very fun read, had me smiling, and it was that typical, it was dark and dreary outside and I just needed a little bit of sunshine and a little bit of laughter and joy in my day. So I finished it in like a day and a half, maybe 2 days. I just curled up in bed and had a blast reading this fun rom-com in a book. And the banter was also perfect. The main male character is also a Byronic hero, which is a word that my tutor or my mentor in the seminar taught us. She was like, he's a Byronic hero, tall, dark, handsome, and brooding. So Byronic hero is a new word for you guys. Then I read the first book in a trilogy, which is Daughter of Smoke and Burr by Laini Taylor, and I've read her Strange the Dreamer duology, and I've been meaning to get around to these for quite some time. I just never have. And the other day I was walking past the Works, which is like, I do not know how to describe it, but sometimes they have like a £3, £4, £5 deal, and then they had all three of the books in these stunning covers, the covers that I've been looking for this entire time. So then I decided, you know what, it's time. I have to bite the bullet. I just have to get the 3 books. And I read the first one and I absolutely devoured it. It was amazing. I knew it was going to be great because I've read Laini Taylor's books before this, but I enjoyed it so much. So this is the story of a girl who lives between worlds because she was raised by monsters, but she's completely human. And she is sent by her caretaker called Brimstone to go collect teeth. And is him on the cover. And pretty much there's this world full of chimera, which is a bunch of creatures formed into one, all going together, and ooh, the light just changed. Whatever. And pretty much this is the story of her trying to figure out what this other world, this elsewhere is that she's always heard of, but that she could never go into because Brimstone completely forbid it. Meeting an angel, falling in love, finding out about her past, going on an adventure and trying to stop a world war, like eradicating everything she loves. And I'm definitely going to try and get to the next 2 in this trilogy very soon because I really enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the characters. Like Karu, which is our main female character, is just so plucky and edgy, and I just adore her. Like, she's got blue hair and she's just living in Prague and being an artist. Like, it's so fun. And it's a really nice young adult fantasy. It's high young adult fantasy, which means that it's completely world building on the other side of like these doors. But I do recommend it if you have not read it yet. And this is quite an old series, well, relatively old, which means that it may be under the radar now, so get to it, read it. I highly recommend. After that, I read this, which is called When All Is Said by Anne Griffin, and I found this in a secondhand bookstore. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was good. That is all I have to say about it. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't underwhelming. It wasn't overwhelming. It was good, sweet. So I also give this a 3.5 star. And this reminded me of Mitch Albom's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. It was quite similar in feeling and writing style and message that it carried across. So it almost felt a bit like deja vu, but it was very sweet. It was a light and easy read. But I picked this book for a reason, and you'll have to stay tuned for next week's video to figure out why, or to find out why. But it has something to do with the word when. So that's a little bit of a hint. It's a buzzword, if you were wondering. But yes, I enjoyed it. It was pretty much an elderly man sitting in a bar and making 5 toasts to 5 people that made a massive impact, or had a massive impact in his life. And they're all five of these people have already passed away, and he's pretty much telling his son why he is toasting to these people and what they did and what they meant to him, and pretty much just sharing his entire life story through the 5 people that came into it and changed it completely, and making a toast to each of them with a specific drink accompanied to that. And it was sweet. Like I said, it was sweet. It's definitely sad-ish, but once again I recognized a few elements and writing style and kind of storyline from Mitch Albom's pre-book. So a little bit underwhelming, but a solid 3.5 stars. And the last book that we have on this list is Luster by Raven Leilani. And with this one I had a bit of a moment, because at first when I read it, and I thought it was luster as in the gleam on a metallic thing, or you know, like the word, the adjective luster. And then by the end of it, and honestly I'm ashamed to say how long it took me to realize that it's luster, as in she is a luster. So she lusts after things. And in the context of the book, it makes complete sense. But because it took me forever to realize that it was a real, like, I wouldn't say blonde, it was like a real moment. So yeah, firstly, I really enjoyed the book. It is a solid 4 stars. It follows a young woman called Edie, a young black woman called Edie. She's 23 and she lives in New York. She is in an entry-level job in publishing, and currently the story starts where she starts dating an older white man who is in an open relationship. So already the context and the situation in this book is really convoluted, difficult, and complicated. And then add into this all her childhood trauma and all the things in her life and in her growing up years that have influenced her. It just makes life difficult and messy for this character. And a lot of it is her own fault, but it makes sense with regards to how she grew up, around who she grew up, her parents, the situation of her parents, what they were like as people, and all that. And I enjoyed it because it was gritty and it was interesting in the sense that she, as a character, only understands herself with relation to other people, especially men. And she can't see herself as this fully formed thing without being appreciated by men or having sex, you know. So her body and its influence and its use is a big part of who she is and how she makes sense of the world. And that's where the title comes from. But so the story follows her and this man who are in an open relationship, and then she goes and lives in the household with this man, his wife, and their black daughter, who they adopted and don't quite know how to look after. So now she's helping out with that while being in this weird relationship with the husband, being kind of friends but also in a weird like situation with the wife. And it was all very uncomfortable but really well written. And there were so many subtleties and so many like little notes that were made by the author about life and the different characters, that so much was packed into this teeny tiny book. Because at one point the little girl who was 12 was calorie counting, and her mother was helping her with that. And this was a form of psychological kind of control over their lives because it felt like it was falling apart. And then this character is trying to paint and trying to be more than she is, but she feels mediocre. And then everything just culminates and is a great commentary on many things that we overlook and we see as normal or we just do not talk about. So it was quite fascinating, and I really, really enjoyed it as a whole. And this main character was really unlikable, but also understandable because you could see her in the context of how she was raised, which was quite fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. So I'd recommend this for an interesting read about a young woman in the American economy, struggling to pay rent and work and pay off student loans, struggling with a past that has formed and shaped her, and being in a weird situation with other people. So yeah, I recommend. I really do. So that is all for today's video. I read 6 books in total, 6 3/4 books if you count Jane Eyre by Emily Bronte. Which one? Anne Bronte? Emily Bronte? No, Emily wrote Wuthering Heights. This is Charlotte? I can't remember. Whatever, it's fine. So I read about 7 books this month. And it was a very busy month, so we'll see how we get along in the next month. But stay tuned for the next video, because that super secret, top secret project will be revealed then. And why, when all is said, is part of that will finally come to light. But yeah, if you stayed until now, please leave a bookworm, a little worm in a book in the comments, because we are all little bookworms here. And thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye.